Welcome to Chapter 12.1 of this course, where we take an in-depth look at the functionality of our Adquio SCADA server and Adquio SCADA Cloud. As you know, it's a tool that works exactly the same for both the local version and the cloud version. The only difference lies in the connections. These servers will have a different address at this point because they come through an internet tunnel, a VPN. That is the only difference. In the case of Adquio SCADA Cloud, we will provide you with the Adquio controller already connected to the SCADA through its tunnel. Of course, this tunnel is fully secured since it is an encrypted VPN, so you can be completely confident that the data traveling from your installation's controller to this cloud service goes through a totally secure channel. Let's now return to the editor and take a look at the basic functionality and the key elements of this editor, which will allow you to generate any type of control, whether local or remote, for your installations. The first thing we have is an area where we can define our controls. On the left, we have a series of collapsible toolbars, and at this moment, we only have two of them open. At the top of these toolbars, we have all the pages that make up our SCADA. I have several demonstrations here, but right now, we are on a blank page. Over here, we have an example we've created for our presentation videos, but in this case, we're going to start with a completely blank page so we can fully explore all the tools. To create one of these pages, all we have to do is click this plus symbol. We must give it a name, and by default, it suggests an SVG canvas. We'll leave it exactly as it is. You'll see that it suggests a default size, but on this side, where we have example 1, if we click on the dots, we can go to its properties, and here we have all the default sizes, the standard sizes we can work with. The largest would be 1920 by 1080, which would be a high-definition screen. We can also create a canvas with custom dimensions by entering these values here at the top. Perfect. So let's see what we have at the top. At the top, we have the play symbol, which allows us to test what we are drawing here. What it does is open a new window, and in that window, our SCADA will already be running. This is useful for testing, as the designer doesn't allow direct testing. This is a utility that allows us, with Ctrl and the up or down arrow keys, to increase or decrease the size of this canvas. Other options include undo and redo, which undo the last change or redo it. We'll look at the other icons later. The most important icons are these two up here. The gear icon gives us access to the settings, and the disk icon lets us save and open projects. If we select Save Project, it will save the project on the server. If we choose Save Project As, it will allow us to download a copy of what we are designing to our local computer. New Project is for starting a blank project, and Open Project attempts to open a project from our computer. Of course, we also have the Remove Project option if we want to completely delete the project we're working on. It's important to know that SCADA refers to everything we have here as a project. Each of these is not a project. Each one is just a dashboard, and each project can have as many dashboards as we want. In this list, we can have 1, 2, or 20 dashboards if we need them for our project. Likewise, the controls we'll see later are unlimited in terms of the number you can use. You can use as many as you need. There are no restrictions. The other button we mentioned, the gear icon, takes us to the Setup window. In this window, we have many interesting things that we'll eventually cover, but not all of them right now. We'll just mention them for now. Under Connections, you already know what we have, as we saw in the previous chapter, all the controllers from which this SCADA is obtaining information. For this example, we are working with Adquio Lite, but we can see that it is obtaining information from more controllers. So, if you need to gather information from 4 Adquio controllers, you'll have no problem. You can add as many as you need here. We return to the window, and here we have some icons that allow us to define line charts, which we will cover later. bar charts, and, most importantly, the layout icon. This allows us to generate an interface to place our views. Those views we created on the left earlier can be organized in a structure where the user can access them. Each view will have an icon and a name, which will launch the corresponding view when clicked. This is one way to organize your views so that the user can access them. We'll also see later that there are more attractive ways to launch these views from another screen, not necessarily from this layout. The layout can have the options arranged vertically, as we're seeing here, or horizontally in the top toolbar, like a menu. Another important feature we can configure here is user permissions. Users are very powerful in our SCADAs because they allow us to restrict access to certain pages in the dashboard based on user roles. For example, you can create a SCADA where some users have access to specific sections while others have access to different ones. And I think we won't go any further for now, as we'll get into these more complex parts later when we explore them in more detail. For now, with this information, we're more than ready to start. The most important things from this setup window are the connections, which provide us with the data to display in the SCADA, and the layout, which allows us to organize our designs so the user can access them. Let's see what else we have here. At the bottom, we have an icon that always allows us to return to the editor or go to the home screen. Home means going back to the layout. Here we have the layout we were looking at. There are several examples. One for public lighting, another example, etc. The other important button is the editor, which takes us back to our editor. Now let's review some basic steps so that we have a solid understanding before we start working on a more advanced example. Let's draw a rectangle, for instance. To draw an object, we select the object we want and place it in the SCADA. Let's do the same with a circle. Select the object, place it in the SCADA, and drag it. The first thing you'll notice is that in the lower part we have colors. Now it's selected, and you can see that the objects within SCADA are quite powerful because you can turn any of these objects you design into a button. How do we make these objects into buttons? Simply right-click and select Interactivity. These are the properties of that object. It can be connected to a variable, variables coming from your Adquio, and its color can change based on the content of that variable. In this example, by default, if the value is between 20 and 80, the object will be filled with yellow, and the border will be black, for instance. This object doesn't have many more features because it's quite basic, but even though it's simple, we can make things happen when it is clicked or when the mouse is pressed over it. We'll look at these actions later, but it's important to differentiate between these two actions. A click means to press and release the mouse button. This is fine when using a mouse, but if we want the design to work for both computers and touchscreens, the correct action is mouse down. Why? Because whether we press with a finger or a mouse, it will trigger the action as soon as it's pressed, without waiting for the release. Very well. This option can open another page, a card, a tab, a dialog, set a value, change a value, run a script, or even close SCADA. Let's see what happens if we select a common option like Set Value. It will ask us what value we want to set and in which variable. For example, if instead of Set Value, we choose Toggle Value. Each time we press it, it will toggle the value between 0 and 1 in the connected variable, just like a switch. In actions, we can also do many things with a variable. Show, blink, rotate clockwise or counterclockwise, move to a position, etc. This can be interesting if we want our SCADA to be dynamic and have objects move. However, The options we will use the most in SCADA are hide and show, as they allow us to accomplish many things. In summary, in actions, we have great flexibility since we can do almost anything with our objects. These are the basic properties of a simple object, like one of the shapes from this palette. They all have the same options. The objects we will use the most are those from the Controls palette, because they are the most useful. For example, let's place an input field here. This field has a mask, meaning it will only accept certain values, like a masked field that can be used for entering decimals, currency, or measurement units. We also have simple buttons and drop-downs. Drop-downs are interesting because they display values linked to a variable. Additionally, we can set them to read-only, meaning the user can see the value but not modify it. For instance, to display a list of possible errors in the Kasambi network, there is a table of values that range from 1 to 256, with approximately 20 distinct values. Each of these numbers represents a type of error. In the driver, the luminaire, overheating, etc. These values could be assigned to the dropdown, so when the value changes in Adquio, the dropdown will display the corresponding error type. The user will be able to see it, but not modify it if it is set to read-only. Next, let's see that the button also has a connection with a variable. And its color can change according to the value of the variable. Additionally, we can make the button perform actions when pressed, such as setting a value in a variable, changing it, or prompting the user to enter a value through a form. We will now explore some other interesting controls. We have a progress bar, which is quite useful for displaying levels, for example, illumination, temperature, or tank levels. It will be connected to a variable, and its internal level will adjust according to the value in the variable. The next control is an LED indicator, which of course, like the others, is connected to a variable and can change color based on the content of that variable. This is particularly useful for making visual representations. We also have line graphs, circular markers, pipes, and potentiometers. The potentiometer is perfect if, for example, we want to control a lighting level. You'll see that it can be placed vertically or horizontally, and we can change parameters like colors, maximum and minimum values, and the number of steps it takes. For example, if we leave it as is, the value it sends will be between 0 and 100, with one step at a time. You can adjust this freely, for instance, for Kasambi, where you might set it to range from 0 to 255, with each step incrementing by 1, allowing control from completely off to maximum brightness. We also have a switch that stays either on or off, for example. Like the others, it is connected to a variable, and we can customize the colors for the different parts of the switch, as well as the text displayed for the 0 and 1 values, depending on what we want to indicate. Something interesting if you want to tweak the look of the switch is that here we can define the pixel rounding for the edges. Therefore, we can make a switch look more appealing, for instance, by rounding it off completely. If I set it to 10, we get a perfectly circular switch. You'll see that what we put in the text field gets activated, and we can change the font, size, etc. Now let's move on to bar charts, which we'll look at later, data tables, and the web container. The web container can be useful in certain cases because it acts as a web viewer. If you want to pull data from another source, this container allows you to define which URL to load. For example, we can try not adding a tag here. And when we run it, we'll see the web page load inside the container. Next, we have pie charts and image options, which are very important. The image feature allows us to upload custom images. What can we do with these custom images? A lot of things. For instance, we can upload a background image to work on top of. This background image can be sourced from anywhere, but in our case, as you already know, it is usually designed with tools like Canva, just like our screens. We then place interactive objects on top of it. There are also many other tools we can use to create the background image before adding the interactive objects. Additionally, since these images have an on-click property, as we saw earlier, we can also design our own buttons and make them trigger actions when clicked. Lastly, we have panels, which we won't use for now, but later on, we'll explore how they can be useful. For now, we've covered all the tools available in the left-hand toolbar. We have symbols for different types of installations, objects for animations, although any of these objects can be animated, and a huge gallery of icons. There are icons for almost everything, though as we saw earlier, you can upload your own through images. Let's close this and move on. Lastly, we have our images, and if we had uploaded one, it would be available here for reuse. Similarly, logos can be uploaded in the same way. With this, we've now covered all the important areas of our SCADA system: the top bar, the dashboards we can create, the design elements for our dashboards, and in the bottom bar, the color options we can apply to our objects. There's one more essential thing to mention, which we'll see in later examples. If you upload an object to SCADA that has a transparent background, it's significant to select this icon at the bottom to ensure its background remains transparent. Otherwise, if you paste a transparent image, SCADA will automatically add a white background to it. But don't worry, that white background was added by SCADA. If you select the transparent option, the object will appear with its transparent background as intended. With that, we have concluded this lesson, in which we have briefly covered all the options available in our SCADA. In upcoming chapters, we will dive deeper into how to make the most out of these options. We look forward to seeing you in Chapter 12.2. Until then,